If you were a Russian man born in 1923, there was roughly an 80% chance you would not live to see 40. Not from disease, not from old age, from one war. That number is so extreme that historians still argue about whether it's exactly right. But nobody argues about what it points to. A generation in one country simply erased. You've seen the beaches of Normandy. You've seen the flag go up on Iwo Jima. Those images are burned into how the West remembers this war. But the country that lost the most human beings in the Second World War isn't the one you're picturing. It isn't close. Which country lost the most in the Second World War? The answer depends on what you mean by lost. Are we counting military deaths? Civilian deaths? The destruction of cities? The collapse of economies? Or the generations that never got the chance to grow up? Between 1939 and 1945, somewhere between 70 and 85 million people died. The exact number will never be known. Records were destroyed, borders changed, and entire communities disappeared without leaving reliable lists behind. At the global level, that was roughly 3% of the world's population. But global averages can be misleading. For some countries, the losses were far greater. In parts of Eastern Europe, 1 person in 5 was dead by the end of the war. In Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, and several other regions, entire towns were destroyed, populations were deported, and millions of people were killed through combat, starvation, forced labor, occupation, and mass murder. When we remember the war, we often picture the familiar scenes: the beaches of Normandy, the ruins of Stalingrad, Marines climbing the slopes of Iwo Jima. We remember the generals, the tanks, the aircraft, and the great battles. But behind every battle was another kind of war, one fought with factories, railways, fuel, food, and manpower. Modern war is not won by courage alone. It is also a contest between economies. Which country can build more aircraft? Which army can replace its losses? Which government can keep its population fed? Which nation can continue fighting after its cities and railways have been destroyed? The answer looks different depending on which country's records you examine. For the United States, the war became an industrial transformation. For Britain, it meant victory at the price of financial exhaustion. For China and the Soviet Union, it became a struggle for national survival, measured in millions of dead. So to understand the Second World War, we have to look beyond the question of who won. We have to look at the bill. How many people died? How much wealth disappeared? How many factories were built? And how many cities were erased? To understand how the war reshaped the world, it helps to begin with the great outlier, the United States. America lost approximately 416,000 service members during the war. Every one of those deaths devastated a family. American troops were killed in North Africa, Italy, France, the Philippines, and across the islands of the Pacific. But compared with the countries fighting on their own soil, the American experience was very different. The United States had a population of roughly 132 million in 1940. Its military deaths were tragic, but they did not create the kind of demographic crisis seen in Poland, Germany, or the Soviet Union. And the American mainland was never invaded or subjected to a sustained bombing campaign. There were attacks in American territories, including Hawaii and the Aleutian Islands. German submarines also attacked shipping near the coast. But the factories, farms, railways, and cities of the continental United States remained largely intact. That gave Washington something the other major powers did not have: room to mobilize without fighting a war at home. The United States spent roughly $340 billion wartime dollars, an enormous sum even before adjusting for inflation. But much of that spending became factories, shipyards, airfields, vehicles, and weapons. America became what President Roosevelt called the arsenal of democracy. Between 1940 and 1945, American industry produced roughly 300,000 military aircraft. It built tens of thousands of tanks and tank destroyers, and launched thousands of cargo vessels, including the famous Liberty ships. These ships were designed for speed and mass production. Some could be assembled in a matter of weeks. They were not elegant ships, but they kept the Allied war machine supplied. Then there was Lend-Lease. The United States sent Britain, the Soviet Union, China, and other Allied nations trucks, locomotives, radios, food, fuel, aircraft, raw materials, and ammunition. The Soviet Union still produced most of the weapons used by the Red Army, but American supplies mattered enormously, especially trucks, locomotives, aviation fuel, food, and industrial materials. They helped move men and equipment across a front thousands of miles long. By 1945, much of Europe and Asia lay in ruins. The United States, by contrast, possessed an intact industrial base and enormous financial power. It held a majority of the world's official monetary gold reserves, roughly 60% or more, depending on how the calculation is made. American factories accounted for around 40% of global manufacturing output in the immediate post-war period. The war had cost the United States heavily in lives and money, but it had also transformed the country into the most powerful industrial nation on Earth. Britain had helped win the war. America emerged from it with the means to shape what came next. In 1939, the British Empire still stretched across the globe. Britain controlled trade routes, colonies, ports, and resources on an extraordinary scale. But 6 years later, much of that power had been spent simply keeping the country alive. The United Kingdom lost roughly 380,000 members of its armed forces. More than 60,000 British civilians were killed by bombing and other wartime attacks. During the Blitz, German aircraft targeted London, Coventry, Liverpool, Hull, and other cities. Later came the V-1 flying bombs and V-2 rockets. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. Families slept in underground stations while fires burned above them. In many cities, the damage was measured not in individual buildings, but in entire streets. Yet the greatest British loss was financial. Britain was an island nation dependent on imports. It needed food, oil, iron ore, rubber, machinery, and fuel. Those supplies had to cross the Atlantic, where German U-boats were trying to sink them, and Britain had to pay for what it imported. Before Lend-Lease, Britain bought American goods under the cash and carry system. Payment had to be made in cash, gold, or assets. British investments overseas were sold. Reserves were drained. The country's financial position weakened year after year. Lend-Lease helped prevent an immediate collapse, but it did not make the war free. Britain ended the conflict deeply indebted to the United States and Canada. The loans lasted for decades. Britain finally made its last payment to the United States in 2006. That fact captures the larger story. Britain won the war, but victory did not restore its old position. The country had spent much of its wealth defending the empire, and after 1945, it could no longer afford to maintain it in the same way. Independence movements accelerated across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. The empire began to break apart. Britain had survived Hitler, but it had not survived the war unchanged. In the West, the losses were enormous. In China and the Soviet Union, the numbers became almost impossible to comprehend. The Pacific War was fought across enormous distances, but its human cost was concentrated across Japan, China, Southeast Asia, and the islands between them. Japan's expansion began before the wider World War. Its war in China had already been underway since 1937, when the conflict in Europe began. By the end of the war, approximately 2 million Japanese military personnel had died, although estimates vary depending on how missing and disease-related deaths are counted. The civilian toll was also catastrophic. In 1945, American bombing campaigns turned Japanese cities into firestorms. Many were built largely from wood and paper, making them extremely vulnerable to incendiary weapons. On the night of March 9th to 10th, 1945, American bombers attacked Tokyo. The resulting firestorm killed an estimated 80,000 to 100,000 people, making it one of the deadliest air raids in history. Other cities suffered similar destruction. Then came Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The atomic bombs killed tens of thousands immediately. By the end of 1945, the combined death toll from the bombings and radiation effects was roughly 100,000 to 200,000, though estimates differ. Many survivors died later from illness and long-term radiation effects. Japan surrendered, its cities were devastated, and the country came under American occupation. But Japan was not the only society destroyed by the Pacific War. China had been fighting for 8 years by the time Japan surrendered. Its army was poorly equipped compared with Japan's, and the country's railways, factories, and cities were repeatedly attacked. Chinese military deaths are commonly estimated at around 3 to 4 million. Civilian deaths were far higher. People died in massacres, forced labor camps, disease, bombing, displacement, and famine. Japan also conducted brutal experiments and biological warfare through Unit 731 and related programs. In 1938, Chinese nationalist forces destroyed sections of the Yellow River dikes in an attempt to slow the Japanese advance. The flood may have killed hundreds of thousands of people, estimates range widely, and displaced millions more. It delayed the Japanese army, but it also destroyed farmland and deepened the suffering of civilians already trapped in the war. Because records were lost and the conflict spread across a huge area, no exact total is possible. Most modern estimates place China's total wartime deaths somewhere between 15 and 20 million. That would make China one of the greatest victims of the entire conflict. Yet in many Western accounts, the Chinese war remains a secondary story, despite the fact that China fought Japan longer than any other major Allied power. And even China's suffering was overshadowed by what happened on the Eastern Front. The war in Eastern Europe was not simply a struggle between armies. For Nazi Germany, it was a war of conquest, racial ideology, starvation, and extermination. Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, opening the largest land war in history. The front stretched thousands of miles, from the Baltic to the Black Sea. The German army advanced rapidly at first. Then the campaign became a war of mud, snow, hunger, and industrial-scale killing. Germany lost approximately 5 million military personnel, although estimates vary by definition and by whether missing soldiers are included. German civilians also died in large numbers. They were killed by bombing, disease, starvation, fighting, and the chaos of the war's final months. The deaths of German civilians, including those who died during the expulsion of ethnic Germans from Eastern Europe, are difficult to calculate precisely. Estimates commonly range from roughly 1.5 to 3 million, depending on which categories are included. But the most devastating losses occurred in countries caught between Germany and the Soviet Union. Poland was occupied by both powers. Its government was destroyed, its population terrorized, and its Jewish population targeted for annihilation. Poland lost approximately 5.6 to 6 million people, around 1/6 of its pre-war population. Nearly 3 million Polish Jews were murdered, along with millions of non-Jewish Polish civilians. The death toll came from executions, ghettos, extermination camps, starvation, forced labor, military operations, and occupation policies designed to destroy Polish society. Poland was not merely conquered, it was targeted for removal. But the highest total death toll belonged to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union lost approximately 26 to 27 million people. Around 8.7 million of those were military deaths, while the rest were civilians. The German occupation brought mass executions, forced labor, deliberate starvation, and the destruction of entire villages. Jewish communities were murdered by Einsatzgruppen and other killing units. Prisoners of war were left to die from hunger and exposure. The siege of Leningrad lasted 872 days. Hundreds of thousands of people died from starvation, disease, bombardment, and exposure. Estimates often place the civilian death toll somewhere between 800,000 and more than 1 million. Across the Soviet Union, cities were destroyed and farmland burned. Millions were deported or forced into labor. Families disappeared without records. The Soviet Union lost around 14% of its pre-war population. Its economy and infrastructure were devastated, even though the country emerged on the winning side. The demographic damage was especially severe among young men. One frequently repeated estimate claims that as many as 80% of Soviet males born in 1923 failed to survive into later adulthood. That figure is difficult to verify and remains disputed among demographers. But the underlying reality is not in doubt. An extraordinary share of an entire generation was killed, wounded, imprisoned, or permanently displaced. 27 million deaths are difficult to imagine. It is easier to picture what the number means. It means millions of homes without parents, villages without young men, cities rebuilt around cemeteries, a country carrying the memory of a war that had touched almost every family. When the fighting ended, the world had not simply chosen winners and losers, it had been rearranged. The United States held the money, the factories, and much of the world's remaining financial power. Through institutions such as the Marshall Plan, it helped rebuild Western Europe and strengthened its influence there. The Soviet Union had paid for victory with an immense human sacrifice. Stalin wanted a security zone between the Soviet heartland and the countries of Western Europe. Across the East, governments loyal to Moscow were installed. The result was the Iron Curtain. The Cold War was not created by ideology alone. It was also shaped by fear, exhaustion, geography, and memory. Europe's old empires were weakened. Britain and France were no longer the unquestioned powers they had been before 1939. The United States and the Soviet Union stood at the center of the new international order. Two superpowers faced one another across a continent of ruins. Wars are declared by politicians. Generals plan them in headquarters, moving symbols across maps. But ordinary people experience war differently. They experience it through the ration line, the telegram, the missing father, the burned house, the empty classroom, and the name carved into a memorial. The final bill was not paid in speeches or medals. It was paid in destroyed economies, ruined cities, lost empires, and generations that never came home. Somewhere between 70 and 85 million people died. That was roughly 3% of humanity. But 3% is only an average. For millions of families, the number was not 3%. It was everyone they knew. That was the true cost of the Second World War.